wasp sting, water moccasin, you name it. But everybody's scared to death of Al-Qaeda.
Attention GC.
All right, we are back live, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to go right back to Corey and others that are holding. Then I'm going to get into some of the other global news and Ron Paul news, election news, Russian election news. Putin isn't doing too well. I guess he hasn't put in the special electronic voting machines that help the globalists here. But before I go back to Corey, I just want to remind you, I learned 17 years ago about the globalist plan to implode the economy, to bring in the military. I went to urban warfare drills 16 years ago, 15, 14, 13, right through to about 5 or 6 years ago. And now I just send reporters to them. And now they practice putting citizens in the local sports stadium, blocking cities, and it's all admitted. And I want to direct you to a New York Times article that came out 2 years ago that showed the Explorer Scouts, actually 3 years ago, 2009, scouts trained to fight terrorists and more. And the first line of the article says, they take out the disgruntled Iraq war veteran with skill. Yeah, they're only 14 years old, but within a few years, they'll be ready to take on the right-wingers. Nationwide, the Boy Scouts training to take on American patriots. The video games, all of it. The military. The training manuals. Remember this one? Secret State Police Report. Ron Paul, Bob Barr, Chuck Baldwin, libertarians are terrorists. They're now saying mainline libertarian groups. I mean, this is it. Returning veterans, #1 threat. Remember that national story? We broke it. Some good people inside the federal government sent it to us. And it's on record as real. Now, the #1 cause of death is automobile accidents. Then it's cancer, then heart attacks. But way down the list in the World Almanac, I've bought one of these a few years ago. I don't know the numbers right now. They change every year, but they vary slightly. Way down the list, I mean, I think it's 30 or 40 down. But guys, type in, you can probably find it as a factoid. What would be the right way to search that? Something like ranking, your chances of dying in a terror attack ranking according to other dangers. Something like that will bring it up. I mean, it's way down there. I mean, you got a better chance of a honeybee. Do they have men in black uniforms on every street corner in the summer in case a honeybee, a child sits on a park bench on one and it stings them? That probably happened to me 10 times as a kid. In the swimming pool, honeybee stings you. Sit on a park bench, honeybee stings you. Playing in a treehouse, wasp stings you. I remember one time a kid got stung, swole up red, ambulance had to come, one of my friends. I mean, it's incredible. There it is. There are the numbers, and this comes from your chances of dying in a terror attack. And it breaks it down. It's 540,000 to 1. Oh, that's just hijacking in a plane. If you got them all together, it's 9.3 million in 1. And that's from a bunch of different actuaries and breakdowns from insurance companies. Your chances of dying in a terrorist attack, put it back up in your lifetime, are 940,000 to 1. I mean, what you got like a 1 out of 3 chances of dying in a car wreck. Same thing with heart attacks and cancer. You can pull that up. All right, I'm sorry, Corey. I wanted to make your point. And yes, we've got the training manuals. We've got footage of it in my film Road to Tyranny. But you show up to police academy, and it's like, man, the #1 threat is the right-wing terrorist. They will attack you. They've trained every police department in the country. This came out in the Washington Post 5 years ago, that they will be hit by IEDs. There will be roadside bombs. There will be, and I guess if they start arresting everybody, people are going to be forced to fight back, and I guess there will be. And it will be the veterans that fight them, Corey. I mean, can you imagine working for the New World Order when they start trying to arrest citizens for no reason? People are going to be forced to fight. Corey, go ahead and tell your story. I'm sorry, I just wanted to back up what you were saying. Go ahead. So you're in the police academy day 1. Tell us what happens.
Yeah, so like I said, he was teaching a class on hazardous materials, and he was from Homeland Security, so he was a police officer before that. He went to Homeland Security, and now he's an instructor. So he comes in the classroom, he's chit-chatting a little bit. So he gets serious, and he's like, in the past, officers dealt with traffic accidents, pulling people over, things like that. Your generation's going to deal with IEDs, suicide bombers, car bombs, and that's going to be pretty much on a daily basis. It was so ridiculous. Everybody's shitting their, crapping their pants.
All right, sir. Listen, All right, I want to hear the rest of the story, but I appreciate it. Yes, what the caller was talking about is what's going on, is what's happening, and we've got all the training manuals. If you're a new listener and heard me say the Boy Scouts are trained to kill veterans, I gave you the New York Times headline, and they got like 40 photos on there of teenagers training to track down and kill Iraq vets, okay? I mean, you can't make it up. I've been sent probably, I quit counting, more than 20 times from all over the country, but once in San Antonio, where the drills with ROTC, they don't train to fight the Viet Cong or the Russians or the Venezuelans. They always war game, and any ROTC listing knows this, against the militia. I mean, the government is illegitimate, so it trains to wage war against the American people. Let's go to Insider, former Marine in Kentucky, to get his take on this. Insider, go ahead.
See, that was a misunderstanding. I am personally not military. I have a quick story. Two of the biggest fears I've always had about all this coming. Number one is not having enough ammo and food. Number two is about military, police, and civilians. So I really prayed about it because it was really on my mind. And sometimes we find the best answers in the most unlikely places. After just a stressful week between me and my wife, we decided to get out one night and go to a local watering hole. So we're sitting there at the bar talking to the bartender, and I still have a lot of testosterone in me because I do talk about politics and religion at the bar. A guy comes in, roughly my age, around 40 or so, sits down, overhears the conversation, starts nodding his head. So I thought, I'm going to feel him out. Ask him a few questions about the president and everything. Well, he totally agrees. He's a complete, just a patriot and everything. Well, long story short, I asked him about the policing of citizens, and he told me that he was an ex-Marine scout. He had served time in Iraq. He'd been in Afghanistan. This dude had been everywhere and done everything. And he said that, I assure you, 100%, they will not. He said, as far as I know for the Marines, he said, and most of the military I know will not follow the order to disarm Americans. He said, who you have to worry about? He asked me a question. He said, who disarmed the people in Katrina? I said, the military. He said, well, you're kind of right. He said, it was the National Guard. He said, those guys are the ones you got to watch out for. He said, but career military, guys in the Marines that have seen action stuff, he said, I assure you.
Well, let me stop you. It was mainly the National Guard, and if you've watched my film, Police State, The Rise of FEMA, that we put out just last year, we got a colonel on. We have all the video of it. They did gun confiscation drills in Arcadia, Iowa, and they admitted it's for America. So that's who they have got trained for this, to literally cordon off and go door to door taking the guns. And you're absolutely right. And the police have been trained for this. I appreciate your call. All right, here's the deal. I'm going to hit some Ron Paul news, some geopolitical news, some economic news, some Olympia Snowe calling for a New World Order news. The senator, who, by the way, just voted for this police state takeover. But the reason I'm harping on this so much is when the bankers get ready to rob you, they always try to use the military against the people. I mean, this is some serious news. Okay, I want to get to your calls in a final segment coming up, and I need to hit a lot of news right now. Here's the type of stuff that I've got in my stack here. Look at this propaganda piece. Unvaccinated hospital employees required to wear face masks during flu season. And this report here out of Natural News has links to mainstream articles where in Houston, Texas, you name it, they're saying for 3-4 months out of the year, you got to wear a face mask if you don't take a vaccine. And that's all about introducing the idea that you're quarantined, you're diseased, you're scum if you don't take all these shots. And you've got the big vaccine makers trying to get hundreds of vaccines mandated to work in schools or hospitals. And then next, it's the police. They want to force take every new vaccine that comes out for meningitis, you name it. When these vaccines are publicly linked to death and illness and all sorts of problems and are given government liability protection. And there's just incredible propaganda running right now where if you're not vaccinated, you'll get other people sick. Well, wait, if you took the vaccine and you're protected, how is that? See, I happen to do the research. I happen to know that most measles cases are in people that took the shot. I happen to know that when you take the regular flu shot, it reduces your immune system by more than half. I happen to know that 1.4% of the time do they actually guess the flu vaccine properly the year before for the next year, and that it lowers your immunity. So it's a shot that doesn't even protect you. It's a total hoax and a fraud. I saw in a magazine this weekend in a, in fact, I got it in the car. I meant to bring it in here. It's a National Geographic, an ad for boys to take the Gardasil shot. Cervical cancer kills less than 3,000 people a year, and it's always people with autoimmune deficiency problems. It's some warts. And the vaccine insert says it doesn't protect you. I mean, folks, learn the facts here. They used to have, thousands of years ago, where they drill a giant hole in your head if you had a headache, saying, let the demons out. In George Washington's time, they put leeches on you. It's a fraud. In fact, we were looking at statistics of what some of the number one causes of death in this country are. What was it? Number 5, according to the World Almanac, was hospital infections. I mean, you better have a compound fracture before you go to the hospital, folks. It's mooey dangerous. So we got that fraudulent article. I mean, that article about that fraud, that excellent article about that fraud. Here's some more here. Washington Times. Issa says Holder ouster is up to White House. The House of Representatives is not going to try to impeach Holder, the Attorney General. He's on record, caught lying. So is the White House, and it's up to the White House to do something. You know why? Because Holder 2 months ago came out and said, Bush was involved as well in another program like this. Of course they were. Iran-Contra wasn't the first time the government shipped drugs in and guns out. You think the crooks that run our system are going to let $500 billion go to crackheads? Yeah, it goes into their pockets. They make it illegal to keep the price up. Justice withdraws inaccurate Fast and Furious letter sent to Congress. NPR's reporting. Now, here's this article. Yeah, they got caught lying in those letters about not knowing anything about it. Here's another one out of a roll call. Justice Department reveals origins of false gun letter to Senator Grassley. More lying. Oh, they're nice people. And then here's the final article here I wanted to get to for you. Oh, the New York Times today. U.S. agents launder Mexican profits of drug cartels. Since it's coming out in federal courts, we told you back in February, 10 months ago. Since it's coming out in federal courts, now they've got to whitewash it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The government launders the drugs and runs them. New York Times, but it's all a big whitewash article. Nice people in government. Let's just get rid of our due process and let them arrest us secretly and have hitmen kill citizens. That's a really good idea. Remember, 12 years ago, it came out that they are stealing the death benefits of all U.S. troops as they die from their widows and widowers. Does that sound like a nice group? But they say support the troops, don't ask questions. Let the government steal their pension funds for private corporations. They're criminals. Just like you get the flu, we got a case of tyranny. Denial will ensure our destruction. You know, sometimes I notice in a stack of news, the guys print off and then I print off a trend. And I see this pretty much daily, so I thought I'd get to this. Because I tend to read all the news and never cover about 90% of it. But it's all up at Infowars.com and Prisonplanet.com. 5-year-old cuffed and charged with battery of cop. And now it's turned out that it wasn't true that the person even touched the officer, but the 5-year-old threw a fit. Probably because they're drinking too much Coca-Cola, but he sent him off to the juvenile hall for yelling and throwing a fit. All of us would have been in prison, folks. All of us. 99% threw fits when we were 5 years old. Here's another one. Children on welfare incurred debts of parents. This is the San Diego Herald Tribune, and they're reporting that millions of dollars a year is taken from people after they get out of high school, basically, if they were on welfare. You're like, well, good, make them pay. The point is, you can't be guilty for something somebody else did. Unless you're in the Soviet Union. That's all. People inside the federal government sent it to us. And it's on record as real. Now, the number one cause of death is automobile accidents. Then it's cancer, then heart attacks. But way down the list in the World Almanac, I've bought one of these a few years ago. I don't know the numbers right now. They change every year, but they vary slightly. Way down the list, I mean, I think it's 30 or 40 down. But guys, type in, you'd probably find it as a factoid. It's training to take on American patriots. The video games, all of it. The military, the training manuals. Remember this one? Secret State Police report. Ron Paul, Bob Barr, Chuck Baldwin, libertarians are terrorists. They're now saying mainline libertarian groups. I mean, this is it. Returning veterans, #1 threat. Remember that national story? We broke it. Some good help the globalist here. But before I go back to Corey, I just want to remind you, I learned 17 years ago about the globalist plan to implode the economy, to bring in the military. I went to urban warfare drills 16 years ago, 15, 14, 13, right through to about 5 or 6 years ago. And now I just send reporters to them. And now they practice putting citizens in the local sports stadium, blocking cities. And it's all admitted. And I want to direct you to a New York Times article that came out 2 years ago that showed the Explorer Scouts, actually 3 years ago, 2009, scouts trained to fight terrorists and more. And the first line of the article says, they take out the disgruntled Iraq war veteran with skill. Yeah, they're only 14 years old, but within a few years, they'll be ready to take on the right-wingers. Nationwide, the Boy Scouting, wasp sting, water moccasin, you name it. But everybody's scared to death of Al-Qaeda.
Attention GCN.
All right, we are back live, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to go right back to Corey and others that are holding. Then I'm going to get into some of the other global news and Ron Paul news, election news, Russian election news. Putin isn't doing too well. I guess he hasn't put in the special electronic voting machines that